Hey, everybody, welcome to the Dream Big podcast. I'm so glad you're with us. And you get to hear today from a voice that you need to hear from. It's Micah Tyler, and he's got some great things, not only great music to listen to, but a new book that's out called Walking Free, Taking Small Steps to a Big God. Micah, welcome to the podcast.
I'm so grateful to be here, Bob. Thanks for having me, man.
Oh, this is good. I've been following your career from afar and just so proud of you and this very clear and humble message that you have to people. It's more than just like good music or about writing books and all that. Tell us a little bit about who you are. Like if you peel back all the things that you're known for, let's talk about underneath that. Who's the guy?
You know what? I'm a dad to 3 kiddos. I'm a husband to my beautiful wife, Casey. We were high school sweethearts. So we've been married it'll be 19 years next week. And we got married at 20 because we could not wait any longer to be poor. So we jumped right in. Whenever I was 17 years old, felt the calling to go into ministry. So at 18, became a youth pastor right out of high school and started doing youth ministry there. We had 7 kids. The first week I was a youth pastor, I preached my guts out. And the next week we had 5 kids show up. So I lost 30% the first week I was in ministry. But you know what? You got to start low so you can work your way up. And so when I was 20, I bought a guitar because I wanted one of the kids in the youth group to learn how to play it. So maybe that he could like lead a couple of songs before I would preach. And he didn't want to because it involved a book. So I started learning a few songs because no one in my family is musical. So I learned a few songs on the guitar. That turned into me leading worship for the youth group, leading worship for buddies' youth groups because they couldn't afford to bring in like a real band. So they asked me to come in because I'm not a real band and started doing that. And then at 27, felt the calling to step out in faithfulness to pursue music. And it wasn't because we had a record deal or a tour bus picking us up. We just wanted to trust Jesus and be faithful to this next step that he was calling us to. And so we sold over half of what we owned, bought a single wide mobile home trailer, started doing some odd jobs on the side. I was a substitute teacher. I drove a sausage delivery truck. I was mowing grass for people and playing music. And now 12 years later, I'm sitting here hanging out with you, talking about a book and music and still trying to be faithful to whatever God puts in front of me.
Oh, man, what a great story. How can you not like that? I think for people listening, sometimes you have this impression when you meet people that everything is up and to the right. And it's like, and then I did this, and then I invented medicine, and then I went on to, I got to say, really, that is not the story. That's the story in reflection. When you look back, edit it heavily and condense it and fabricate a couple of things, it looks like up and to the right. Yeah. And the reality is that there's some steps ahead where you go like, oh, it worked. And then a couple setbacks. We each deal with those differently. As a lawyer by training, when there's a setback, that doesn't tend to scuttle me. It isn't like somebody threw the whole sock drawer on the floor and I'm like, oh heavens, what will happen? Certainly, I'm sad when there's something bad that happens, but I think I go into see all the socks and match them, see what goes with what and just kind of get busy. How have you dealt with setbacks in your life? Because that's where a lot of us, we can learn something about ourselves when something just didn't go right. Something as deeply personal as music, you'll have something that'll work and something else that won't. How do you deal with those?
Well, what's really interesting is I've realized that there are definitely some times where I have both feet on top of the mountain or both feet down in the valley. But what I find myself a lot of times is I kind of have a little bit of both, especially when I have a faith in Jesus. I feel like that there's always something in my life that is hopeful and that has goodness in it, but also in this world, we will have troubles. And so it could be like us battling something really difficult, but also being able to know that we have a family that loves us. Or it could be something funny. So for me, I know you're friends with Phil Wickham. We both have Phil Wickham as a buddy. So Phil took me on my very first tour, and I just started out doing music. I just signed a record deal. We just put a song on the radio. And when you start off as a new artist, you're just busy all the time. And we were still living in the mobile home. We were still trying to make ends meet and just trusting the Lord with this whole thing. And so we didn't have a whole lot of extra money. So how touring schedules work is you fly out and you hop on a bus and then you ride that bus on Thursday. You do a show and Friday and Saturday and Sunday. Then you fly home on Monday and you fly back on Wednesday and you do that for a couple of months. Well, I could not afford all those plane tickets. So I just asked him, do you mind if I just like stay on the bus every once in a while and not fly home? So we were actually in San Diego. We did a show on a Sunday night. I said, is it okay if I stay on the bus until Wednesday? They said, absolutely. So it was my first time to try doing this. I fell asleep. I woke up to myself sweating. I'm going, why am I sweating? Well, they had forgot that I was on the bus. So they just turned the bus off. So this is just a dead bus at this point. And I'm going, it's okay. I've sweated before. I'll sweat again. And so I thought, and all of a sudden I looked at my phone and I had all these text messages, and it was my record label and my manager. And they're going, hey, your song is top 20. And I'm going, what? And they said, yeah, your first single, it just hit top 20. This is a big deal. Congratulations. You made it. I was so excited. And then at that very moment, my phone rang and it was my wife. And I'm going, oh my gosh, I get to tell her the good news. Or maybe somehow she knows the good news and she's going to tell me. So I said, hello. And she goes, what are you doing right now? I said, well, I'm sweating a little bit, but I'm hanging out here on this bus. What are you doing? And she goes, don't spend any money. And I said, what does that mean? She said, we have 87 cents. And I said, where? She said, to our name. And somehow a couple of bills went through early before I got back home. So 87 cents. I said, okay. I've got $40 in my pocket that I kept from the merch table last night. I can live off that for 2 days. So I remember I couldn't even afford an Uber. I walked about a mile up the road to a Food Lion. I bought ham, cheese, bread, and then a case of water. And I walked it all the way back, a mile back to the bus. I got onto this sweaty bus with no electricity. I'm sitting there in the dark, eating a ham and cheese sandwich and sweating. And I remember saying, I made it.
That's awesome.
Yeah. But
there's something about those are the stories.
That's it. It's 1 foot on the mountain, 1 foot in the valley simultaneously. Yeah. And listen, I've definitely walked through. Back in 2017, we were hit with Hurricane Harvey. And I live in Southeast Texas, had 40 inches of rain on my house in just 2 days. We ended up having to replace the floors and the walls in 4 rooms in that home. 6 weeks after that storm, my brother Daniel was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer and given 2 years to live. And I mean, that's a really deep valley, but still, the reason we wrote this book is because through all of that, we found out that there is still a savior who loves us enough to walk in the valley with us. That it's not this, if I can clean myself up enough and climb my way back up onto the mountain, then I can see him again. No, he comes down to the depths of the lowest spots. And we always have this hope in Jesus. We always have this reason to go, there's a reason to take another step. There's a reason to lift our eyes and go towards something better. And so that's real life. Real life is not, again, Jesus himself said, in this world, you will have trouble, but take heart because I've overcome the world.
Yeah. And so sometimes something will happen. Somebody's listening right now and it's been just a really hard slog. It wasn't dramatic, but it was just this, it may be a relationship. It may be you're in this job that just, it might've been fine when you got it, but it just isn't you right now. What I want you to do is to say, what's the most humble and courageous thing I could do right now? And sometimes it's just hanging in there and just knowing that it's noble to plant the crops. It's noble to pick the crops. It's noble to bag the groceries. It's noble to work as a night security guard. It's noble to be up front in front of a lot of people. And it's noble to lead a small family as the mom or dad. But I want us to do noble, courageous work. There's a story, one of the books in the Bible is called Acts, because it's like the things that the apostles did. And it said, the 4th chapter of that book said, there was a guy, Peter and John, it said, they knew these guys, they knew they were just unschooled, ordinary people, but they saw their courage and they knew they'd been with Jesus.
Yeah.
And so maybe this has been a time where it's just been a really difficult thing, either all at once or a little at a time. But I want you to have that kind of courageousness that expresses nobility, like continuing to do the hard work of raising the family, continuing to do the hard work of sorting out the relationship. And people will know that you've been with Jesus, that you're doing that hard work.
Bob, one of the reasons why I'm such a big fan of you is that in that same chapter, in Acts chapter 4, verse 20, the kind of the head honchos back then, the religious leaders at the time were getting really upset because Peter and John and these other guys are out there sharing what Jesus has done for them and all this great, and they're celebrating these things, and they're getting a little uncomfortable, and they go to him and they say, hey, kind of calm down a bit. Maybe we need to shut you down ourselves, but like, we don't have to do that. So just like calm it. And Acts 4:20 says, how can we not talk about the things that we have seen and heard? And what I love about you is that you are such a celebrator and you are such a joy monster that to me, it's like whenever we do go through difficult things and then all of a sudden things start to we start walking our way out of it, we should celebrate those little steps, those little things, because it's something worth celebrating. And who knows that there's somebody else in a trench right next to you that needs to see that there is still something worth celebrating and still a Jesus worth knowing and something worth hoping in, even when it feels like it's just really hopeless. And so that's something I've always, when you mentioned that chapter, I always loved that phrase. And there was like, how can we not talk about the things that we have seen and heard, because we've seen and heard good things.
And a lot of the stuff happening in our life is kind of happening underneath the surface. So I love the idea, a practice of saying, take away what you're known for and whatever's left is who you are. So take Bob the trial, or take all the law stuff away. Like, what's left? It's like Bob the family guy. Or then write a book, write a song, take away the music, take away the authorship, like whatever's left is who you are. And those are all the things that aren't seen. So if you go to Disneyland, it's always the party, which is just like ground zero for every Enneagram 7. But underneath Disneyland, there's this elaborate tunnel system. And that's why the characters aren't walking down Main Street. They pop up here or there. And because of what's going on underneath the street, you get to see what's going on in the celebration. And so to just know that God's at work sometime in this, it feels like something you'd see, stitched into a little pillow at a Christian bookstore. And I've always been a little bit suspect of that. But to know in my life, I've seen it's the stuff that's unseen in my life produces the couple things that are seen. And there's a whole lot going on underneath the surface than there is above the surface. Have you noticed the same thing?
Yeah. I mean, somebody said this to me probably 12 years ago, 13 years ago, and it stuck with me ever since. We will never, as a believer, and talking about how Jesus sees us and what he calls us to and what he's calling us to be, we will never stand before him and him say, well done, thy good and successful musician and author, or successful trial lawyer, or plant worker, or mom, or dad. Our calling is that he will say, our hope is that he will say, well done, thy good and faithful servant. That just means like being a friend of Jesus and a friend of our neighbor. That's being faithful to the calling that we've been given by him. And so it's not about our successes, because here's the deal. If our whole life is trying to be successful, then we're failures, because we will fall short. We're going to miss the mark from time to time. But if we're just trying to be faithful and only faithful to what's right in front of us, I can't be faithful to tomorrow. I can't reserve my faithfulness and be like, okay, if you will line up X, Y, and Z, then I will be so faithful to that. Because what happens if God wants you to sit right here on the letter V and just be faithful to that thing before we can get to those next? What if he's building something today that you get to be faithful to, so that whenever X, Y, and Z do come, you're so much more equipped to handle the moments and the love and the celebration and the hurts and everything in between that comes when those days do come. And so I'm just such a proponent of going like, my job is not to be a successful musician. My job is to be a faithful father, a faithful husband, a faithful brother, and a faithful friend and follower of Jesus.
So just getting really practical, as you're listening, from whether you're stuck in traffic or out on a jog, I want you to think of this. What do you want? It was the question Jesus asked every blind guy he met. And it wasn't because Jesus was confused. He wanted, do you have clarity on what you want? And so think of Babe Ruth famously pointing his bat at center field. And he's like, I'm aiming for that. Then I want you to think, if you were ever in a Little League or watched in the old days, they would have somebody on deck and they would have their bats and they'd have those donuts around them, not like jelly-filled, but like they were lead-filled donuts. And they would swing the bat with the donut on it until they did a study a number of years ago. And they found out people that warmed up using one of those lead donuts on their bat actually swing slower. It feels like you're swinging faster when the donut's off it, but you swing slower. So picture yourself pointing towards that thing you want with your bat. And then one by one, these donuts, the pressures, it might be financial, it might be relational, it might be this conflicted life that we all lead. We've had this one way we want to be and the way that we are. And like Paul, he was saying, I just keep doing what I don't want to do. And these are all donuts on the bat. What we need to do is figure out what is taking you away from being that person that you want to be. So what do you want? Then I want you to say, why do I want it? Because if you want applause, join the circus. you want Jesus, find the poor.
Right.
So what do I want? Why do I want it? And then decide this, what am I going to do about it? And come up with a plan and execute the plan. God will let you know if he's got a different plan, but I want you to start moving. So you knew what you wanted. You had a message, or Paul Revere, you want to get it to the right people, and you were going to get it in song. How did you vet why you wanted it? I don't think you were looking for applause. I'm not getting that vibe from you.
No. I think for me, it really, I think that doing 9 years of youth ministry and kind of growing up alongside of a youth group, like I was a kid when I first started doing youth ministry. And so for me, it was never, and I am just as guilty of comparison being the thief of joy as anyone else, like looking around and being like, okay, what is their group doing? Or what can I wish we had these kind of facilities, or I wish we had this kind of a budget, and I wish we could do these kind of things. But the moments that I felt the most elation in my chest was being able to celebrate what we had right in that moment, and not reserving my celebrations for when something better comes along. For me, being a dad is one of the most fulfilling things in my entire life. You could put me on a stage at Carnegie Hall in front of thousands of people and have them chant my name, and that is such an honor to get to go walk onto stages like that and do things like that. But at the end of the day, if my 3 kids can look at me in the eye and know that I love them, and they were the ones that were giving, that's something that I will celebrate over and over again. We got to do a really cool thing. I kind of felt like a Bob Goff type there for a little bit, Bob. We do this thing called I do dad adventure days with our kids, and every birthday we try to go do a thing that they've never done before. It could be like crossing a state line. It could be going to a PG-13 movie. Like it's like something fun that we can like do together. And so we did it every year. Well, COVID kind of shut us down for a few years. So I told my wife, I was like, hey, for Christmas this year, what if we surprise them, not like a dad adventure, but like we put together an adventure for them, something that they just love, where they get to go do something that they know is 100% just for them, but that they also get to know that we know them, that we know what they love and know how they adventure and how those kind of things. So I got to spend a week. And again, with me traveling the way that I do, it's a blessing and a curse. I'm grateful that I get to go travel and do all these things, but also it is being away from my family is hard. So we have a motto as a family. We sacrifice as a family, so we celebrate as a family. So if I'm going to go fly all over the place, then we're going to gather up all these airline points and we're going to do something fun. If I go to stay in a bunch of hotels, we're going to grab those points. We're going to do something fun with it. So I got to fly our youngest. We gave it to him for Christmas. They had no idea. 2 days later, we all start taking off on these adventures. My youngest and I went to Legoland, and he thought that place was built for him. He was like, this is like, I dreamed this up and designed this myself. And we put 19 miles on our sneakers in 2 days, running around Legoland, adventuring the whole thing. I fly back home. I pick up my daughter. We fly to New York City. We go watch a couple of Broadway shows, and these are records and music that she's listened to, and I get to watch her. I heard her sing these songs in the shower, and now these characters are singing right in front of her. And then we flew back home. Picked up my oldest. We flew over to California. We went and watched a couple of basketball games. My youngest, my oldest. I mean, these are the basketball cards that he has. They're playing in front of him. And for me as a dad, constantly the hardships that I have of being away from them, all those things kind of went away because we got to celebrate when we actually get to be in those moments together. My favorite part of the trip was not watching basketball games, was not watching plays, or not running around Legoland. My favorite part was watching my kids watch basketball games and watch Hamilton and see their Legos come to life and those kind of things. So again, it's just like it's trying to. What I want is to be the best that I can be. 360 other days of this year, I'm going to be spending time with them, trying to love them and just be the dad, doing the homework, doing the little things. But on the moments where we do get to go out there and just experience something and celebrate, those are the times where I go like, okay, I want to really be able to put both feet in these moments.
Yeah. And it's not just the idea of whimsy. It's what I was hearing is a strategic whimsy. that you're just thinking there's a reason. What is thinking like God creates the heavens and the earth? First thing he does is he hovers over what he created. So as a practical thing, just hover over the relationships that matter the most to you. Say for, son number one, what do they uniquely need that only I could give them?
Mm-hmm.
And then hover over the next. If they need a ride, they could probably get that from Uber. But to just say, what does daughter number one need that only I could give her? What about your spouse? What do they uniquely need that only you could give them? It's just a great way to just take a moment and hover over those, because we tend to hover over people that we're not in relationship with. We're just like, we're just trying to be good and available and all that. And I want to make sure that I'm strategic in saying, let me first start with the center. Think of the rings of a tree, and you go to the middle, like you and Jesus. And then if faith guides your steps, you'll start there. And then the second ring out to say the family's given. I'm positive about that. And the third ring might be that close set of friends you have. But I'd like for us to be thinking of a practice to just kind of check in, whether you do it in the morning or afternoon or evening. Just kind of just say, how am I doing on my rings? Like just say, am I centered in my faith? Am I squared with my family? Because I don't think you were aiming in your marriage, nor was I in mine, to have Maria say, Bob, you've been the best roommate I've ever had.
Right.
So what it's going to take to do that is a little hovering to say, what does she uniquely need from me? And she doesn't need like to go somewhere. She's we call it phobia. Instead of fear of missing out, it's fear of being included. just like funny. She's like married to Tigger. She's like, I don't need Tigger to be showing up right now. Just sit with me. We'll have a cup of soup together, and that'll be just delightful.
Yes. I don't need to be a good neighbor to my wife. I need to be a good husband to my wife. I need to be a good friend to my wife. And so I can be a good neighbor to my neighbor, but like trying to really inventory and evaluate those relationships that we have, kind of like in the rings, like what you said, I think is just, it's such a gift too. It's because I can get to know my wife a lot better than I can the neighbor down the street, because we are roommates. I took it to spend time with her, but then also I get to celebrate those things in her that God's gifted her with. And that's a real joy for me too.
Yeah, and taking stock. And so I'm a big note taker. People that write books like you, people that write books like me tend to be note takers. And so what I'll do is just something will occur to me and I'll just take note of it. I'll write it down, a couple words. And then what I'll do is the stories that are the better ones get more attention. They'll just come to mind again. So whether you fancy yourself as an author or not, I want you to auth. I know that's not a word. I want you to take notes of what's going on. And what you're going to do is you're going to see some evidence of God in your life when you do that. It was Deuteronomy 6 and again in 11. It just says when you wake up in the morning, talk about what God said when you're walking by the way. So in my way of thinking, just take notes of these things as they're coming your way. And as you later put those things end to end, you'll see this beautiful trajectory that's happening. And it'll include some really hard stuff and some really fun surprise. The call, it's number whatever on the billboards. But it'll be a mix of both. And what I want to do is look back at that over the arc of our life and just see that God just continues to show up in inexplicable ways.
So in the book, that was one of the reasons we structured the book the way that we did, is because every day is a step. So it's just a practical one. It's like we're stepping away from this and towards something else, right? So every step we take, we just kind of go through a couple of paragraphs, walk through the idea of taking that step. And at the end of it, we just take a little inventory. We're like, okay, was this a hard step for you? Was this an easy step? Why do you think it was hard? Why do you think that was easy? Was it a confirmation to you? We write some notes in there. So we do that for 6 steps. And on the 7th step every week, it's a retracing your steps. We just go back and look at those 6 steps and go, wow. So which one of these stuck out to you? Which one are you still thinking about? Which one are you still struggling with? Which one do you think you could go deeper with? Which one do you think like, man, that was just confirmation to my heart that we're on the right path here? Because if God on the 7th day looked back and had to take inventory and say that everything was good, right? Jesus is constantly saying, remember me when this happens. Remember this when this happens. So for us, I'm going, why would we not just take 42 steps here together and make them purposeful, but also take times every week to look back and be like, okay, what am I learning? Not just like run a race and just try to get from point A to point B, but go, what did it feel like to actually take that step that day? And so that's important to me. And again, taking inventory is just a big part, and writing those things down and note taking those things. And I've got a file in my phone called the Hook Book. So as a songwriter, if something really sticks out to me, I put a quick little note in there that's in the Hook Book. And I may go back and look at it and go, what in the world did I even mean by this? And sometimes I can't stop thinking about it. And those end up typically being in songs. And now that kind of ended up being in a book.
That's crazy. Yeah, I'm older than dirt. And what I've been doing, I've been taking notes for the longest time. I'm glancing at all of these in binders. There's 2.5 million words that are just written 5 words at a time over all the arc of this thing. So don't be discouraged by that, but encouraged as you're listening to this to just start writing this down, because if there's going to be someday I'm going to be in a jar, and all of my kids are going to have access to everything I thought when I was around. And they're not big, fancy. The sun rose on eagle's wings. I just said in the morning, and they're not journals, Dear Diary thing. There's just things I'm thinking about pain and loss and joy and mystery, and like what is fun, like it's unwrapping a present or wrapping a present like a guy or whatever, to just like take all those seemingly random things. And I promise you will see an arc in there.
Beautiful.
Well, Micah, thank you. You've been listening to the Dream Big podcast. There's a book out there you got to get, Walking Free, and you'll tap your feet to Micah's music. But more importantly, I think his words are going to really touch you. So give that book a look. And I apologize, that rhymed. But thank you.
My songwritership is wearing off on you. This is good. It's like a song now. Give that book a look. I love it. We got a jingle now.
Never trust advice that rhymes. So you guys who've been listening to the Dream Big podcast, and a new friend to you will be Micah Tyler. So thanks for listening.